Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. I'm Russ Cavasso, and joining me as always is Tim Ledney. We're back with part 2 of our interview with our first guest, MD Payne, author of the middle grade children's series Monster Juice and a handful of books in the Who Was series, including Who Was Duke Ellington. Picking up where we left off, I think MD had a question for us.
How do you guys, I have a question for you two, and I know we're lily padding far from our original spot.
I think it's, you know what it is? I think we are a trio, a jazz trio.
There you go.
About writing.
Oh, I like
bringing it back.
Wow. Well
so let's
played.
lily pad. What you got?
So my question is, how do you, as writers, deal with that dynamic of like, it's such hard work and nobody sees it until it's done, and it's such a hard creative endeavor versus, oh my God, how badass am I that I wrote a book? Like how do you guys deal with that dynamic in your head as writers, and where are you drawing inspiration from when you are in desperation?
So, I mean, I have a quick answer to that, and it's more of like something to live by, I think, and less, it's more of a goal, right? I think the work is more important than the product for myself right now, at least. And I think sitting down to write is its own reward most days. I won't say all days, because some days are absolutely terrible, but most days the routine of sitting down and taking time for myself and creating is very cathartic, and my neurons are firing. I feel very, very good about it. And I think it has positive ripples throughout my life with my family. Obviously it's got the potential to distract me, but on the good days, I get reaffirmation from just coming back to the table and writing. And even though the goal of publishing and being read is large, I don't want it to overshadow, I think, what the importance is, which is the work. So that's my hope, and that's how I get through it.
Yeah, I can echo that as well. I think just sitting down and having that creative moment, but then I think I was kind of flowing really well, and then I hit the editing process and I hit a wall of something I didn't know how to get around, and that's been still very difficult for me. I'm still trapped. I have things on a whiteboard here. I've got Word docs open from my editor. I'm still just kind of stuck. But I'm trying to take the time to just do small chunks to kind of get me through it, and it kind of works along. But honestly, and this is gonna sound cheesy, but I mean, and Tim and I we've mentioned this before, like honestly, when he and I started doing our like writers chats like once a week on Monday nights, let's talk about where we're stuck and getting through things. That actually really helps, kind of like that support to kind of push you to the next day. Because I feel like the next day I was like, I'm the most productive I've been in like 3 days. Like, forget that weekend,
Yeah, totally. Having a safe space and somebody that you can kind of confide in without judgment has been crazy, crazy helpful.
Yeah, but it's also, balancing the idea of having nothing and putting all this work into this thing that I don't know how people if they're going to like it or not, and then it gets out there and it's like, well, that was a fun year and a half of life. I guess I'll go do something else.
It's a crazy thing too. Like, Matt, I'm trying to picture your perspective a little bit. Somebody who's sold and who has been read. And I think it's really easy for me to say, oh, I just focus on the work, but I've never had that dopamine positive response of selling and being read. There's a really good chance if I get this out and sell 100 copies, my perspective might change like significantly. Like I might be addicted to that idea of, promoting the book or promoting myself. And I might have a hard time getting back to what now seems kind of pure. It almost seems like, I don't know, genuflecting. I don't think I'm going to go to, if publishing is, the ultimate goal here, it seems so far off and removed from me that I think it's easy for me to say, oh, sitting down is its own reward. And how will that mutate and change once I'm published for the next book? Like, will it be more difficult having a more concrete, idea of what being published and being read feels like? And that's one of those long tangents that Russ usually has to edit out. So,
yeah, I mean, for me, the first book was the thrill of doing it. I mean, obviously being asked to write for a notable publishing company, it just the thrill of it. Like there was fear, obviously, but it was just so thrilling to be like, oh my God, that was the moment of like, I'm an author, and just saying that alone, even though no one had read it and who knew where it was going to go. That was enough. And then, as I got into the Monster Juice series and the numbers went down, that's when it started to be like, oh my God, this is a bummer. And like you were, like you say, you're looking at a much farther out kind of like goal, as opposed to just like, oh my God, I'm so glad I get to write about like brain ooze in Egyptian pyramids. And like, I got to pull in a new character, a serpapard. Do you know that the Babylonians actually thought serpapards existed? This is amazing. There was still some of that, but it's also like, oh man, I thought Burpstronauts was my strongest book and it just tanked. And they have me writing 5 and 6, but are they going to just bury it? And like, and then ultimately I kind of landed on, it doesn't for me matter about sales. Ultimately, at one point it did. At one point I was like, I need to make this my career. And so the way to make this career and to give my family relief and be like, you know what, Carmela, I'm going to be paying all the bills now. And you
buy yourself a new car.
Sit on your Chase lounge. Yeah. As the numbers go up, you feel good with that goal as your end goal. And as they go down, you're like, oh, I'm ruined. Yeah. And then you have to force yourself to go back to like, no, but the reason I started this was because it's the thrill of writing, no matter who read it. And what's helpful for that for me as an author is connecting with the young readers.
Yeah.
And just one kid saying, oh my God, I read your Scooby-Doo book and I loved it. And I got to watch Scooby-Doo with my parents. Like, I didn't even know they loved Scooby-Doo. And like, oh my God, there were so many doos. There's, you know, the mommy do and daddy do and mom's, you know, like all the doos, right? Like, so it's just like geeking out with kids, and with Monster Juice, especially with kids who had never really read before, and to connect with a young mind and set them on a path to reading. I'm like, I'm already good. I'm good. Like whatever I do now is like, you know, frosting on the cake, because I got several emails that were like, my child hated reading. They read your book. They devoured it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You know, like, so for me, you know, different with adults, because obviously that's a different, you know, you're not dealing with new readers. That's also why I haven't switched to adult. It's that thrill of knowing you're like connecting with these young readers and just like lighting up their brains.
Yeah, that's that cycle of success, and by like, I guess the various goals you hit is kind of interesting, right? It's like mine right now is just to get this book out, no matter what wherever it goes, traditional or self-published. That means I've completed this thing and I'll be happy with that. Then it's gonna be like, oh, I sold 10. Can I sell 20? I sold 20. Can I sell 100? Oh, I sold 500. Yeah. And then I read a second book, which will be just as like that equal high. And then that one only sells 10. It's like, well, what's going on here? And I could see like that kind of cyclical action where then you come back around and say, well, what am I actually doing this for? And it's because I enjoy putting words to paper and creating a story that someone may find something out of and enjoy. So
you made me think of 3 things, and I must speak of them before I lose them. Thus is the middle-aged one. One, I feel like, you know, if the ultimate goal is to connect with a reader, right? As a writer, like ultimately, like we can say like, I like writing for writing, but ultimately, you know, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there, does it make a sound? Like at least one person has to read that book before it becomes a book, wouldn't you say? So to me, then wouldn't the self-publishing route be the more fulfilling, right? Because you're basically like, I will get it out there. What are the chances there will be 0 sales? My mom's going to buy a copy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like at least someone's going to buy it. So does that make self-publishing the better route? The second thing with that is I'm sort of in my mind thinking about, you know, with the querying route, you basically are stepping up to a gate with the tiniest hole and you have to shove your book through it. And only after like several people allow you to do so. And then it plops on the other side. And there's only a few books there when it gets there. So when people wander over to it, there's more of a chance they may pick it up. Mm-hmm. Whereas self-publishing is, there's the biggest hole you can imagine. Everyone's tossing their book through it. And when people approach the pile, how are they going to find yours? Like, I think ultimately that's the difference between the self-publishing route and the querying route, is that, you know, basically, are you doing all your blood, sweat, and tears beforehand and then hoping that you're more noticed in a smaller pile, or are you just making it happen and then probably doing some more blood, sweat, and tears to lead people to your needle in the haystack? like is
Yeah,
kind
I mean,
of
I
what's
was hoping to
happening.
have a tiered approach where I, shoot high, aim high, try to get an agent, try to go the traditional route. And then, after 6 months to a year of banging my head against a wall, if that doesn't go, then I think I would explore the self-publishing route. I think you're right. The end goal is to be read. And I would love to, be able to share this, not just verbally, with my kids or my wife, but actually physically share a copy or, an EPUB with somebody. So I do think, self-publishing it could very well be part of my journey. I wouldn't put all my eggs in just the representation basket, but I would feel remiss to not try. I feel like I've kneecapped myself my whole life about creativity and taking risks. So if the risk here is time and a bruised ego, I think I'll take that. And then if that doesn't work out, then pivot and explore the self-publishing route.
I will say one thing we didn't talk about yet. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about with just querying. And like, I'm going to throw myself into the game, into what's known as the slush pile, in the hopes that an editor, really an assistant who picks it up, passes it to an editor, and it gets made. But what about the agent, right? Like, I mean, we know you don't need an agent if you're self-publishing. I myself don't have an agent because of that backdoor action coming in through the back door. But the agent for me is, probably a worthy companion on this journey if you're going the querying route, because they're opening that hole up a little bit more, turning it into a door instead of a keyhole. It's not the like massive warehouse, freight elevator door that you get when you're self-publishing, but it's not the teeny tiny hole if you're just doing it yourself and trying to like toss at the slush pile. And have you guys ever considered an agent?
I can say I have, but only because of your email, Matt.
And thus become full circle.
But yeah, I mean, at first I didn't really want one. I was like, oh, I don't understand that. Let's just, quote unquote, cold call, reach out to, publishing houses. But from what you've shared with me, it sounds like it's a worthy endeavor to try to secure an agent because it increases your chances of being seen. I won't say 100%, but, some percentiles. And honestly, the idea of having somebody on your side that believes in your work, that's doing that, would be really, really helpful. Honestly, I think if I could secure an agent, that effort trying to secure one and pitching one and marketing myself will be taxing. But then it ends in a way, and then it's their job to go sell me, and I can hopefully then focus on writing for some time. So that's what I would hope. But once again, I think that was really based on your advice, Matt. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it crossed my mind earlier on. I kind of just, I don't know. I think I had just a moment where I was like, you know what? I just want total control of this process, and I want to just not have to wait on other people to create something for me. I think that was the key too. I think it was just like, I can do this all myself, and I'm going to go do that. And I don't want
trying to talk you into like querying, right?
Yeah.
I was probably trying to talk myself into it and just using you as like an avatar or something. But you were waffling a little bit, not waffling, but you started out with self-publishing, and then you were seriously considering it for a while.
Yeah, no. And I was going back and forth, and I read war stories on both sides. And I think what it just came down to is I didn't want to wait on someone else to create something. And I didn't want to have to sit there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe never. At some point I'd cut it off and say, all right, I'll just self-publish. But I didn't want that. I want to write this thing, and I want to get it out there. And I don't want to have to wait for someone else to say that's okay to do. Book number one, success is getting it out there for me, and hopefully a couple people read it.
Because the chances, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, the chances are slim to none of your self-published book, that book itself, being picked up by a traditional publisher, right?
So yeah, I mean, look, if you go to any publisher's website, you will find submission guidelines, and that is the teeny tiny keyhole I've been talking about, where you can shove your manuscript through it and hope that it gets noticed and not shredded. And it does, and it happens. And, assistants see something they like and they pass it to editors and they go, wow, and it happens. But also in the age of the internet, you can find editors' contact information, or at least weasel your way through like main phone numbers down the line to like editors' numbers. and connect. It's not impossible. So even with querying, I would suggest doing the same kind of legwork that you would do if you were reaching out to an agent and trying to pitch your idea to them, so that you know who to reach out to. And this is, I think, another one of the things I emailed you, Tim, was, it's going to get more notice if you write a cover letter that really connects to the publisher as to why you're reaching out to them, or specifically to the editor, why you're reaching out to them, or to the agent, why you'd like them to be your agent. Because you can Google around and you can see comps, those authors, agents and editors and publishing houses, and start doing your homework on setting yourself up within the marketplace, saying why you think you'd connect with this editor or this agent, and then saying, but why you're different, right? So it can't just be like why you're similar, then you have to set yourself apart. So that process, I feel like, is a worthy endeavor, whether you go down the pure querying route or first to an agent, because both the agent and the editor publishing house is going to want to see more than just like a title and read the first few pages why it is that they'd want to, spend more than 30, fleeting seconds looking at your manuscript.
And I want to make sure, is it definitely an or? Is it bad form to push both of those forward, sending to agents and also sending to houses or editors?
As far as I know, it's not. Like, as far as I know, working both sides is fine. Because the worst that happens is an agent says they want to commit, and you're like, oh, I just got an email from Joe Schmo at Joe Schmo Publishing.
I love Joe Schmo Publishing. You're going to be the first ones that I write to.
They work with PETA Publishing. Yeah.
Who I think will take interest in my book. Yeah, those themes, man. Whew, a little heavy-handed. Thanks for that feedback.
I can't wait to read this thing. I'm ready.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to need your input about those themes, Matt, because it's much like a punk song. There's no subtlety about it. And I don't know if that's for better or worse. It's intentional. I can say it's intentional, but I might need to rein that shit in a little bit.
It's funny, and I appreciate your use of the word shit, and I noticed a few fucks in the previous podcast.
We sprinkle them. We sprinkle curse words out.
Yeah, see, that's not something I can do writing for children. And like, I'm still worried that doing school events, I'm going to slip and be like, this is fucking crazy, right? I mean, look at how that fucking storyline went. Fuck. It's so like, so I'm kind of eager to dig into like adult themes, because it's not just about the words. Like, we need like, I'm writing for 8 to 12-year-olds, which means I'm kind of writing for 8-year-olds, right? So like, what are the words that I get to use? What are the themes that I
wanted to ask you about that, about the themes, honestly. Do you approach each book, like each fiction book, with kind of preordained, pre-thought themes in mind, or do they develop naturally as you're writing?
Initially, it was, let's just see what themes arise. And so for Monster Juice, it became, respect your elders. Like, there's these old monsters in the monster home, and they can't really help themselves that they're monsters, but you should be friends with them and you should meet them on their level. And more kids and grandparents should be doing cool stuff together, right? Like, that kind of was a theme. Friendship between generations became a theme, but I never intended for it. Whereas with the new book, it's there's a massive pumpkin, like one of those, prize-winning pumpkins that's growing in the center of a field at a farm that has supernatural powers and is using the smaller regular pumpkins to broadcast mind control to anyone who would come and buy a pumpkin and take it home. And yes, on its surface, it's going to be about pumpkin mind control, but I also want to touch on the struggle of tweens and kind of like starting to figure out, who am I? Why do I think the thoughts I think? Why do I hide myself from some people and I'm open with others, but then why do I act differently with other people?
Sounds like there's a nice social media analog there too, honestly, with, mind control and, smaller pumpkins and people being called and not knowing why. I think that's a really cool theme, Matt. And
oh, snap. The big pumpkin is
well, it's like the big pumpkin's the algorithm, right? And the little pumpkins are the devices. So, and now this book that you're working on now, this is not Monster Juice. This is the separate thing, right? Is that right?
Yes. The working title is Get Pumped. So it could be pumpkin crazy. We're not sure, or The Boy Who Cried Pumpkin. So that might be a little too complex. And yeah, it's my first I had tried to work on another idea after Monster Juice in the middle of all of the Who Was books I was writing. All of the Who Was books I wrote. Grammar. I pitched another idea to the editor of Monster Juice, and it fell apart. And it in part was my idea not working, in part his overthinking, in part it just wasn't the right timing for what the publishing house was looking for. And I got a very nice letter that was like, the senior editor doesn't want to go with this now, but is very, very much looking forward to whatever you bring us in the future. And so that's kind of where I was with the Pumpkin book was, do I go through that again and risk having it rejected, or do I self-publish? It was kind of the crux, or do I find an agent, right? Like that was, and I did reach out to an agent and ultimately didn't go with one because I just, I was like, well, I'll work with the editor I worked with on Monster Juice. I don't need to find another editor. In fact, I would like to use him because I want to be told what to do, and I know he will. It's sort of like
got the good working relationship.
He's going to give me more changes than I want, but I kind of need that still at this point in my career. So this is the first fully formed idea that I have done since the end of Monster Juice, and it will be out in 2024.
All right.
But so back to themes. In part, you just can't have many themes. It really needs to be a much simpler, unlayered. YA is different. YA is where you can really get into like some of these tougher themes. And I feel like YA has been in the last 10 years tackling themes and, sort of peeling the onion, sort of down to the core of what this book is about in a way that adult publishing hasn't even been doing in the last decade or two. Like, I feel like YA is going there, but with middle grade, for sure, it's a very much more simple, like we've got to just like get them in, get them out, and keep them reading, right? The one upside to like not being able to dig in and just kind of write whatever I feel because it might be too heady for the kids, I have a toolbox at the ready that you just can't use with adult publishing, right? You can do a fart joke, you can be super silly, you can be just like, if I wrote some of the things for adults that I write for kids, I would be, a laughing stock. It's a tool in my arsenal that I can pull out and really attract young readers with, and frankly, have a great time just having a laugh with. Like it is much more joyous and funny and stupid and like fart jokes and burps and, silly stuff, which I have appreciated. And I guess that's the sort of upside of, writing for kids when you're stymied by like the limited grammar and themes, you get away with a lot more, and so it's a lot more fun. Whereas as an adult, you can get away with maybe one scene of a fart. Like, so I think the most risque thing I ever wrote for kids was when the old swamp monster, who is known for his devastating swamp farts, is sitting in front of the kids in a retirement home meeting in the meeting hall, and they can tell he's about to let one rip. And they cork his butt. They take a massive cork and they cork his scaly butt. And it's all so cartoonish that I got away with it. But then I did a reading of it at a school. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I read this? I mean, I literally am like, and then I slowly inserted the cork, and then of course what happens is like a car backfiring as this massive fart happens and our protagonist is hit in the head with the cork and is knocked out and taken to the nurse's office. And I got away with that. I don't know if that would fly in adult
Oh my
fiction.
God, that's so funny. Matt, what's your favorite book that you've written so far, like in the Monster Juice or other series?
I would say, well, not to harp on Fart Tsunami, but that was the golden book, that one, because I came to Monster Juice as a novice, and writing Fear the Barfatron, which was the first book, there was so much overthinking about like the characters and how does it make sense that they end up at this retirement home for monsters. And there was a lot of hand wringing and like massive revisions. And I'm like, am I really doing this? And then I wrote the second book and it just clicked for me. And it was so much fun. And it helps that the gross element was farting, because to me, a fart is hilarious. Barfing can be funny, but is mainly disgusting. Whereas farts are funny for days. Farting and burping, that for me is just like so funny. It's more humor than gross out, whereas barf and boogers is like more gross out than humor. So it was like, oh my God, I am an author. I loved the characters because I had done the work of establishing them. And it just came so much easier.
They sound like really, really good books to not just have kids read and get them inspired, but for parents to actually read to their kids if they're not showing interest, right? Because all of a sudden there's these kind of taboo ideas and, words and farts and smells. And so Fart Tsunami, that's on Amazon now, right? Like folks could buy that on Amazon or...
Yes, it is on Amazon. It's through booksellers that you can find it. It is not currently in print, but there's enough out there that you can find it and buy it.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So thank
everybody
you for that.
buy Fart Tsunami.
Yeah.
Fart Tsunami. Fart Tsunami. Just the title alone is a laugh, right? Like I wrote Fart Tsunami next, and the whole auditorium of children start laughing. That's it.
Done.
That's like, you wrote
my
Fart
work here is done.
Yeah, Duke Ellington also stands out because for me to be able to take what I had learned through 9 books, now being able to write for kids, at the time working at an independent school as well, so working with kids, and then being able to write about one of my heroes and someone that I feel like the world should know, and like let the 8-year-olds know about Duke Ellington. Like, how do I do that? And everything from working as a jazz DJ to jazz at Lincoln Center to, everything I had done up to that point mixed down into this one book. And it was just such a thrill. And like also to just be able to listen to the music while I was, writing and just like learning so much more about someone I had thought I had known a lot about. The tough part is I wanted to get it right. So there was a lot of like, I can't mess this up. Like, and people are still finding things out about Duke Ellington because he was so good about having a public persona, but I didn't want to write about what Duke Ellington, the man, the myth, the legend, like I wanted to write about the man, not the myth or the legend. Right. And I had to stay true to it. And even the New York Times has gotten stuff wrong about Duke because he was so good about like, this is my professional life and this is my personal life. And he was only married once and he never got divorced. And then he had a series of mistresses, and the Times had it that he had married each of those women in turn, and he had not. He had the same wife who stayed home, and he kept sending money to his whole life, and she sent him their child, and Mercer Ellington grew up with him and was brought up in part by some of these mistresses he had. So it was such a weird thing of like, well, I can't even like talk about what a mistress is to kids. But also I do want to get it right.
Yeah.
How am I balancing all of this that, even the New York Times got it wrong, and only recent research by, I think Terry Teachout is his name, on Duke revealed this stuff. Like it was just so much fun.
Well, Tim, do you have anything else?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah, this was an awesome chat, Matt. Thank you very much for just chatting away.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for making the time and for the tips and the advice and all the barf and farts.
Especially
the farts.
Thanks for having me. As we were talking about before, like being able to talk to people about your writing, whether it be in, content or it just in general, right? Like what it means to be a writer is so fulfilling and makes me going back to my manuscript now like a little more energizing. Awesome. So I'm actually really happy to have been able to do this today.
Thanks. Well, thanks again to MD Payne for joining us. That's our episode. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have a topic idea or feedback, send us an email at chat@writersyndrome.com. Find us on Twitter at writer_syndrome. Otherwise, head over to writersyndrome.com for all of our episodes. And join us next episode where we'll discuss self-publishing with our guest, Jeffrey Morrison, self-published author of Undersea and its sequel, Undersea Atrophia. Till next time, keep writing.